Okay, so the starter on this Chrysler, it's actually a Dodge, my wife's minivan, it went bad, and in the worst possible time too. So it's around 25 degrees. Changing these starters on these Dodge and Chrysler products is not a lot of fun. They're buried. This is the 3.6 liter, and it's the American Value package. So keep that in mind. You get what you paid for. I went ahead and blocked everything up. Underneath here is a little wonky. I'm going to show you how this is done underneath here. I do have the car up on stilts, on jacks, and you can see that over there. I got my two jacks over there, and then I have another jack on this side, and then all the way in the back I got the wheels blocked. But in order to get to the starter, which is up in this direction, you gotta take off this crossbar right here. So in the back there's several bolts. There's actually 4 bolts back there. I went ahead and took those off. And then up front there's these 2 bolts here, and that holds the bushing with the cross pin in right there. And you got to take that whole bracket out. But in order to take this bracket out, you got to take this stabilizer bar off. What I do is I take off these 2 bolts here, and then I take off the 4 bolts in the back. There's 3 right next to each other, and then the 4th all the way in the back. And then what that will do is I do not take this one off, because you can just swing this arm out of the way then. All this will be detached. All right. I went ahead with the, that loosens up pretty good. And then you can swing this out of the way. And you can get to what you need to on the other side there. That's actually the location of the starter, right up in there. And in order to get to it, you need to get rid of this attachment right in the center. So that's what we're going to do. See, without that pressure on there, when you take this off, without that pressure, you can get those bolts off a little bit more. You can even just untighten it with a ratchet, and then some of these you can unscrew with your hands. And make sure you disconnect the battery before working on the starter. There you go, there you go, there you go. Put that off to the side. And then there's another one up in there, which should also be a 16 millimeter. You'll pretty much only need a 15 millimeter and a 16 millimeter socket to remove all the main bolts. There we go. It's coming off. Sometimes I just like taking the socket off of the ratchet. Gives you just a little bit more surface area where you can, with your fingers, unscrew these bolts, and then that'll be sufficient. See, take a look at that. Right there is that other one. You getting that? Right up in there is that other one. This one's a little tighter. Just work it. There we go. See, it wants to come down. Then on that one, let's get a little bit of a longer attachment. And a little bit longer. I'm just twisting now. It's just so tight up in there, man. Okay. So there's the socket.
Watch this catch. That was awesome.
There we go. And that's that bracket right there. So just need to get that bracket out of the way.
Okay, sorry about the background noise. This is the starter from the other side there. You can see that was that round looking object. Looks like a cylinder. And then there's two bolts right there that you need to get to remove the starter. So you got the main part of the starter, and then on top is the little solenoid.
Hey, give me a minute.
Okay, I just got that second bolt off the starter. Gonna go over to the other side. You're gonna see the cylindrical starter. Going to remove the power wires and just loosen it gently and remove it.
Okay, so we're back out here, and you know, that telltale sign for a starter that's gone bad is a clicking sound. You know, you turn on the key and it just goes click, 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 or something like that. And here's a little quick way just to test it and make sure before you put in the new one that it is the starter. So you got a pair of jumper cables. They're going from your battery. Already tested the battery. It's pretty close to 800 cold cranking amps, which is the recommended cold cranking amps for the vehicle. It's about 753, which is plenty for this vehicle. For a diesel, might be something different. But anyhow, okay, so listen, you got the positive and negative attached to the appropriate sides on the battery, and then the cable comes down. And then here's the starter that I got out of the vehicle, and you got your black connection. That's your ground connected to any major metal piece of the starter, which is the housing assembly here. And then over here you have your red assembly, and this is the positive side. And what you're going to do is you're going to make a connection. So this is hot right now, and you can either do it with little jumpers. Let me get a better look. You can do it with little jumper wires, or you can just use a screwdriver. Now watch what happens. I'm going to touch this. See that? Nothing, right? So that's your connection that you're making. So when you turn your key, what's happening is this signal from the key is making the connection, and I'm just jumping it with this screwdriver right here. You got a bad starter, no doubt whatsoever. All right, so we have the replacement starter. We're going to take a look at that real quick. I'll just swap this out and we'll check it. Okay, so we swapped it out. This is actually the original starter for the vehicle. I took it out thinking that my problem before was the starter, and turns out I don't think it was. I think it was just a bad battery. So let's do this again and see what happens. Let's check this original starter on here. This is the OEM original starter. So this is the OEM original starter. I'm just going to check it out and see what happens here. Okay, see that? There we go. That's good. That's what we want. All right. So this one's actually good. We'll put this back in, and hopefully the car will start.
Okay, I'm back underneath the car here, and you can see the starter and the solenoid right there. And we're going to put in these two main supporting bolts. There's also a little guide pin that goes in between the two starting bolts that's permanently affixed, and that you just want to make sure that the guide pin goes into the hole that's already in the starter housing itself. And then you just twist. I like to go, back and forth, top, bottom, make sure that they are nice and snug in there, nice and tight, because when this starter is energized, it kicks out quite a bit of torque. I mean, it's enough torque to actually crank your entire engine. So you want to make sure that the two bolts are nice and tight in there. I'm not sure what the pounds per square inch is recommendation, but if you have a little bit of experience, you can just kind of feel it, make sure it's proper. But like I said, I like to kind of rotate a little bit the higher and then the lower bolts just to make sure it goes in there on a uniform basis, as opposed to just tightening one at a time, and maybe it'll be off a little bit, because you don't want these starters to be off. You saw the little gear mechanism that's in there, and that pops forward and then spins, and then that actually engages a corresponding little gear inside the engine, and it in the starter, after the engine starts, you release the key, the little gear inside the starter retreats back inside the starter mechanism, so it doesn't stay in contact with the corresponding gear inside the engine. So it would just burn out if it didn't. So that's why when you saw we were testing the starter, if you noticed, even with the bad starter, the gear went forward, but it didn't rotate. And then on the good starter, the gear not only went forward, but then it spun. So that's what you want. Then you'll also notice right above the socket set right here, there's the red electrical line that's coming in. You do not want to pull on that housing very hard because there's lots of other housings and electrical wires that are part of that home run. But on the end, on the left-hand side of that red wire, you're going to need to put that wire hole right there on top of the threaded area on the starter. It's a little difficult getting to, so you kind of have to pull it just a little bit. Be gentle with it, be patient, and don't force it. What you don't see right here is the yellow wire, and that's already just clipped onto the solenoid part. So if you recall, when we had the starters out and we were demonstrating what's a good and bad starter, that little teeny tiny clip where I connected the threaded bolt of the main starter to the little tab that came out on the solenoid with the screwdriver in order to jump it, that is the little yellow cord that just clips on. So it's just like one of those little plastic pressure clips that clicks on. So you see right there, I just put the main red wire in, and then there's just a bolt with a nut that tightens it. It is a pain in the butt tightening it, and you have to get in there as best you can. I like to use the other side of the wrench, which is the closed loop side, not the open side. You can kind of get it over the little bolt right there, and then onto the nut, and then just it takes a while. I actually edited some of this out of there, and it's kind of tricky even getting the nut on the bolt right there. But eventually it does fit. Have some patience and use your fingers at first. Again, make sure that the batteries, both sides, are disconnected. The red and the black wire are completely disconnected from the battery, because you will fry this thing if one or both of those is still connected. You could arc. It could be really bad. So make sure that those wires are both disconnected from the battery. But you need this little wrench right here. Anybody should have that in their tool chest. That might be like a 12 millimeter or a 10 millimeter, something like that. And just have some patience. Make sure it's nice and snug. So now it's just a matter of putting everything back together. We actually have the starters in place and everything's connected. Got the 3 bolts that hold on the, I believe this is the front engine mount. And you notice it has like a little bushing right there, that round black bushing. But that goes up in mounts to the engine itself with 3 bolts, and then on the bottom of it where the black bushing is, there's the 2 bolts that go underneath it. So you can see there's, on the driver's side, the first lower bolt, then there's a higher bolt above it, and then on the passenger side of this mounting bracket is the 3rd bolt that goes in there, and it's just a 16 millimeter, and it's just the opposite of taking it apart. But take your time, make sure it fits good, make sure it's really nice and snug, because that's the engine, the front engine mounting bracket. So all the way in the back here, what I like to do is, once you have that mounting bracket in there and it's nice and snug but not completely bolted down, so you have a little bit of play, go ahead and put some of these other bolts back in. I like to start with the one that's all the way in the back of this stabilizer bar, and I just start with the socket set, and the bulk of it I'll come in with a electric screw gun and put it in, but then I'll tighten it up again with the final, with the socket. Again, 16 millimeter for these. And everything will just get right snug into place. And if it's off, then you got to go back and forth with it a little bit. I got lucky on this one, and everything went right into place really nice. Again, I'm sorry about the background noise. We're going to try to filter some of that out during editing. But that jet sound, if you hear it, is the propane torpedo heater that's blowing some hot air down here. You know, like I said in the beginning of the video, this is the worst possible time for this starter to go bad because, you know, I live just outside of Cleveland in Ohio, and it was every bit of 20-25 degrees out there. You can see the snow on the ground. It was pretty bad. So that torpedo, you know, just kind of redirected some of that hot air underneath the car. And I just ran that just a little while actually before I even started working on the car to kind of warm up some of this metal a little bit. If anybody's worked on a car outside or anything with metal when it's cold, man, just touching the metal can be very uncomfortable to say the least. So there I am, just, you know, taking most of the slack out of there with the screw gun, and then I go back by hand and hand tighten it to make sure these things are really nice and snug up there, because that's part of the chassis. Just going to reconnect the battery now, one side at a time. Go in there. I think it's a 10 millimeter socket, and just hand tighten. Don't do it too much on these, but just make sure it's nice and snug so there's a good connection. And there you go. Started up on the first time. Wife is going to be super happy. Hey, if you guys like this video, please subscribe and hit the like button. I really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed the video.